winding up on the education of Dean Riggs, XCT, about blacks. I think I ended up talking about Captain James Miller and the fact that he did the John Wayne thing and got the Silver Star. But I won't be going back to that right now. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things after I got back over here in the United States, home from Korea. Got started down at George Peabody. Got out of the Army in November of '52 and got started at the first semester or first quarter, whatever they had down at Peabody, working on a master's in January of '53. I got the master's that summer. Then later went on out to Greeley and was working on the doctorate. I accumulated a lot of GI Bill and never expected to have. Man, we lived in some of the sorriest summer housing you could ever think of, but one year we got school housing, and our next door neighbor was John Wilson. John Wilson was a black man. Good, handsome, ordinary sized, wasn't the athlete type at all, but then we got along and we'd walk together frequently going to and from campus, and one day we're coming home in the evening and somebody said something to John and used the term boy. Holy cow, John got in that guy's face, read his pedigree up one side and down the other, and I sat back there. I wonder how many of those ugly sayings have slipped out of my mouth. And John's never been like that with me. So his reprimand's over, we're moving on towards the house, and I say, John, it has occurred to me that I probably said worse things than he did. Yeah, he said, maybe you have, but he said, you were just ignorant. He knew what he was saying. Well, I'm glad John was so generous. And I'm sorry to say that apparently I was still just that ignorant. Well, then later, when I was principal at Evergreen Junior High, we got in a new librarian, and she came up from, I think, Sweetwater, Texas. Woo! That woman was a Southerner, and she thought we ought to be teaching our kids to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, yes, sir, and no, sir, and didn't think I was a very good principal, since I didn't think so. Well, worse yet, in a conversation in a faculty lounge, I happened to mention that if I'd had the money, I would have gone down to Selma and taken part in the marches to try to put an end to that terrible, terrible segregation down there in the South. She came unglued, and she didn't leave it alone. She came on back to the office when I was alone and got after me some more. If you'd have been raised where I was and knew those blacks the way I know them, you wouldn't even think about going down to Selma. Those people deserve. Bobby was the nicest person in the world. But man, she had been raised to be prejudiced, and that prejudice was wrong. Sad, sad. It's about the only thing I ever saw Bobby do that I really didn't respect, because she was a marvelous teacher, cared a lot about the kids, and worked hard for the school. She did read my pedigree on anything that she thought I was wrong on, but heck, that makes you a better principal. Got that doctorate finally, and that's a whole other story that I'll go into some other time. And having gotten the doctorate, I wanted to go back to being a school superintendent. I enjoyed being a school superintendent. And I got to be called to be the superintendent of schools at Sheridan, Wyoming. Well, a retired Air Force officer with rank way above anything I ever achieved, he cornered me one day and said, now you shouldn't be going up there. You ought to send him a letter and stay right here. Well, we'd never been on particularly close terms. He had a son that was very bright. He was Mr. Hickok. I said, well, what are you talking about? Well, he said, you don't understand what we have here. He said, we're going to keep the price of property up. We're not going to have those blacks and browns and those other poor types up here with us. This is a super community. Well, bless my soul. Here we are in an enlightened community that's got lots of people that work at Martin Marietta and so on, and a man that prejudiced. Oh, by the way, he said, when I said I thought that sounded like prejudice, he said, indeed, I'm not prejudiced. I was served with black General so-and-so, and that man knew his place. Wasn't there something that had to be decided? He'd let us white officers alone. He'd take a little walk and come back, and we'd tell him what ought to be done, and he'd do it. Holy smokes. Well, I learned a lot. Probably didn't learn enough. But I certainly don't hold a person's color against them, black or brown. And you'll hear a lot about brown later on. Thanks for listening.